Over the past decade, we have seen many games released in a barren fashion, missing many basic features. But for every 10 games we get like Anthem, we get one game that completely turns things around like Final Fantasy XIV, Rainbow Six Siege, and No Man's Sky. That being said, this isn't something we want to be standard in the gaming industry. Games at launch should be a finished, feature-rich product, and gamers should not have to wait potentially years for a game to be updated to the point where it should have been at launch. While I'm iffy at best supporting games like this, at the same time, I do not want to miss out on a really great game. And I feel like The Crew 2 needs to be mentioned here. And while it's not as an extreme case as the games I mentioned, by all accounts it was missing some basic features at launch. However, over the past 3 years, the game has received extensive updates and has improved in many ways. I platinumed The Crew 2 a little over the year ago and have been playing it off and on since. And with it seeing one of the biggest updates to date last week, I figured now would be the best time to take a closer look at the game and see if it's still worth people investing their time into it. As always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more gaming news, reviews, and discussions. So join me as I review and platinum The Crew 2. This was actually the first racing game I've played since the PlayStation 2, so it was a bit of a learning curve for me considering a few things have changed since then. I heard somewhere that The Crew 2 is basically an open world car RPG, which absolutely caught my attention. I'm not quite sure if I would categorize it in that way, but it's certainly close to being one. If you have played the original game, things are a bit different this time around. I've only spent a small amount of time with Crew 1, however, I can safely say the Crew 2 is an improvement over it in almost every way when it comes to how well it feels to control vehicles. The standard Ubisoft revenge story has been replaced for a much lighter tone and has a similar feel to the Forza Horizon series. Basically, you're an aspiring racer and you have to go against the top racers in each racing discipline to earn more followers on social media. The story takes a backseat to the gameplay, and for this type of live service game, it works. A company called Live hosts the races and you'll have a few sidekicks that encourage you and rivals that push you to become a better racer along the way. The dialogue is really cheesy and I think the writers know it as they definitely leaned into it. In most other genres of game, that would not work, but for a racing game of this type, it's fine. That being said, a well-constructed narrative is always appreciated and is usually what makes a game memorable. Live's MO is to push everything to the extreme, so you get to take part in races that would never be possible in real life. You'll be able to race in an airplane weaving through casinos in Las Vegas, do drift events through Miami Airport, race hypercars in a race that starts in Detroit and ends in Miami, and everything else in between. After you choose your stock model racer, you get thrown right into the heat of things, and you will get to witness what makes the Crew 2 so unique. A blend of different styles of races all thrown together. In the live event races, you get to race multiple different types of vehicles. You could start off in a hypercar, move to a boat, then finish things off on a dirt bike. It's basically a vehicle triathlon and it works extremely well as you seamlessly transition from vehicle to vehicle and provide some of the most intense moments the game has to offer. There's 4 racing disciplines, each with 4 different categories in those disciplines, giving you a total of 16 different types of races. You get to race everything from monster cars to airplanes down to dirt bikes and everything in between. You also get to race off-road, on-road, on-tracks, and even obstacle courses. This variety keeps the game constantly fresh as there's always something else to do and there is a ridiculous amount of content. But what makes it so addicting is that basically all those styles of races actually control and feel great. While I would say it's closer to racing sim than arcade racer, don't expect a Gran Turismo or Project Cars 2 level sim racing. Each type of race has its own feel and for the most part each vehicle has its own unique handling, acceleration, and speed. Don't get me wrong, some vehicles like the hovercrafts and boats can be a little hard to differentiate between, but for the most part you will get a different feel from all of the cars, bikes, and planes. Cars handle somewhat like in Forza Motorsport in the sense that you can't take corners going 200 miles per hour, and you will have to hit the brakes and enter turns at the right angle. However, you can make turns slightly faster than Forza Horizon, and even if you are going too fast, you will not drift into the next area code. While some cars drift better than others, the Crew 2 is not like Need for Speed, where you can just hit the e-brake and drift around 110-degree turns. I do think they purposely dampened drifting a bit to make the drift events stand out and have a different feel to the street races, so it seems to be more of a deliberate gameplay design choice. It's a standard brake too much and you'll overturn, brake too little and you'll smash into a wall. But when you get it just right and hit a turn at the highest speed possible and the tires squeak and shoot out smoke, it's extremely satisfying. When you win races, you are awarded loot, followers, and money. As you earn followers, you'll increase in rank and eventually to icon status, which has thousands of levels to earn. Your icon level gives you points to spend in a giant skill tree that can improve basically every facet of your vehicle. For loot, it's important to build up max level gear so then you can start collecting specialized gear sets. There's your standard, common, uncommon, epic, and legendary loot of course, but it's the bonuses those pieces of gear provide that allow you to really customize your car. Higher level gear makes everything better like increasing acceleration, brake time, and top speed. On top of that, everything from uncommon up has 1 or 2 affixes that it can improve, like making your nitro refill faster or allowing you to earn more points in any skill-based competition. Legendary gear all belong to a set, and when you fully equip your vehicle with a legendary set, you get some insane bonuses. For instance, there's the Nitro Chemist set that makes your nitro last 2 times longer, or the Fame Magnet set that awards you 2 times the followers when you win a race. Once you do build up a collection of the best gear, you can participate in the endgame content, which includes PvP races, the weekly live summit, leaderboards, and seasonal events, which is what has hooked me and kept me playing. Money does end up being the most important thing you win in races although, and I'll go over why later. So as you win races and earn rewards, more races and challenges will unlock. And once you reach a certain point, you get to face off against your main rival in a race that switches between races in that discipline. For example, when you're able to challenge Clarence, the rival in the pro racing discipline, you get to have a race that starts in a touring car, moves to powerboats, and then finishes with an Alpha Grand Prix race. These races provide some intense moments and does require you to be at least somewhat proficient at each style of race. For example, in the freestyle rival battle, you have to do a jet sprint and then monster truck race. And while that was a fun mix of races, I'm absolutely terrible at the jet sprint races, so when I did poorly in that section, I had to make up time in the monster truck portion of that race. But this felt like a great way to test the skills developed while playing through the various races required to unlock the rival battles. You're rewarded with a unique vehicle and a short cutscene, but honestly, the cutscenes are fairly forgettable. There's a really good selection of cars, and the Crew 2 has over 400 now, and more are added in pretty frequently. There's a lot of Ford and Chevy models available, along with your usual suspects like Lamborghini, Ferrari, Mercedes, and BMW. There's also plenty of exotic cars as well, basically the same in most other racing titles along with some lesser-known brands because of the sheer variety of events. While the majority of the cars, bikes, planes, and boats are newer, there is a good variety of older vehicles as well from the 1930s all the way up to the 1980s. One of the most important aspects of any racing game outside of how a vehicle handles is a course design, and in that aspect, the Crew 2 absolutely hits the mark. The developers, Ivory Tower, made use of almost every inch of America designing tracks and courses covering the entire map. While it is a very condensed version of America, and I do wish a few more cities were represented, it does have a good amount of areas to explore, and it can take over an hour to drive from one end of the map to the other. While every type of race has some standout courses, I do think the street, touring car, and hypercar variants are consistently the best. The hypercar races can range anywhere from 2 minutes to 40 minutes as you can race from one end of the country to the other. Personally, I'm not a fan of these longer races as it can get painful to hold down the trigger on a controller that long, but they are there for those who enjoy them. Street, mostly you have racing through cities on a course, usually containing shortcuts. If you want to be competitive, you'll have to learn all the shortcuts and the best way to handle each corner, and that is a process that I found rewarding. Alpha Grand Prix and touring car races are on tracks, and the designs are varied and well crafted. Some are simple ovals where you need to find openings to pass your opponents, while others are technical trials requiring you to skillfully approach each turn at the proper angle and speed. These races were my favorite. I just love finding out how fast you can push a car around each corner and trying to come out with the best time possible. Jet sprint races were a test of dexterity, as you have to be able to turn at a moment's notice around twists and bends. But outside of the standard racers, there's plenty to really mix things up. Demolition Derby has you smashing your car into others, trying to get the most points by destroying the most cars as possible. Monster truck events are either races or stunt courses where you have to reach a certain score to win. You'll be going through giant loops, doing tricks in half pipes, and flying through the air after being launched up by a ramp. Similarly, acrobatic events have you perform tricks in the air, and drift events make you drift as long as possible around a track in order to get the highest score possible. Rally raid races basically tell you where to go, and it's your job to just find the best route possible in the open world. Rally and motocross have you racing on dirt tracks, drifting around corners, and launching yourself off ramps. I was a bit down on the rally raid races at first, and while I do not think racing on dirt feels as good as it does in Forza Horizon, I have grown to appreciate these games more over time. You really do need to get a feel for the particular car you're driving and how well it can handle drifting around tight turns. But once you get it down, rally raid races can be pulse-pumpingly fun. While there are a lot more car events than anything else, the variety keeps the game consistently fresh for me, and when I'm tired of something, there's always something else I can try. In the open world, basically everything you do earns you more followers, pretty much exactly like Forza Horizon, although not as many objects are destructible. Unlike Horizon, you do not have to pay to fast travel everywhere, and considering how big the map is, this was a necessity. You can seamlessly transition from boat to car to plane by the press of a button, and I have to say it's really fun to just explore the map going from the water to the land to the air. There's a dynamic weather cycle and you get to see everything from fog to rain to snow, each causing different driving conditions and forcing you to change up your driving tactics. Most races will have whatever weather is going on during the race, but some races do force standard conditions for that particular race. So this means for some races you might be able to get better times if you have certain weather effect going on. Also, there are skill events all around the map like speed traps, escape, buoy smashing, and a ton more. There's live crates you can find hidden around the world that give you loot. It's not the best way to collect gear, but it's a nice surprise here and there. There's also hobbies, which are basically a checklist of things to do that give you awards at certain points, like emotes, costumes, and eventually a unique car. Since the game is online, you will see other people driving around, although I've never really seen more than a few people in one location. You can form a crew with up to 3 other people and drive around looking for loot and earning extra followers. You can also do events in a crew, which gives extra rewards, and if you have a friend to play with, this seems to be the best way to get money fast. Outside of roaming the open world, there's a few spots you can spend time in. You'll get a few houses, which you do not need to buy, each with multiple floors that you can customize to show off your favorite vehicles. It's a lot of fun once you've bought a decent amount of vehicles to set them up at your house and take a look at everything you've collected. And if you're into photo mode in games, these houses actually provide very good lighting to take some really amazing shots. Along with the houses, each discipline has its own hub where you can buy cars, enter PvP battles, and visit the shop. You can test out each vehicle before buying it, and all are fully customizable. You can design your own liveries, or if you're like me and are terrible at customizing things, then you can download ones more talented people have created. There's your usual suspects like Monster and Red Bull, and for some reason the Umbrella Corporation is quite popular. And of course there's the anime liveries. Lots and lots of anime. I've only recognized Goku, other than that, I never know any of the shows these characters are from. And I watch a decent amount of anime, but I did find a nice waifu boat all the same. Outside of that, you can also customize your character's clothing. The selection is pretty limited, but I guess it's something. When it comes to endgame, as I mentioned, there's a few things you can do. I didn't spend too much time with PvP battles, as there just seemed to be better ways to earn rewards. What I found a lot more fun was trying to get better times in the leaderboards and the weekly live summit events. Each week there's 9 races chosen, and you're awarded a score for each event depending on your performance in that event. This is the best way to get gear, unique cars, and cosmetic items. They did recently change it up drastically though, as some individual events will reward large sums of money, followers, or even extra gear. I think they did this to help out newer players since people who have been playing longer have a fairly large advantage. Lastly, there's a seasonal event called the Motor Pass, which is basically a battle pass in other games. It's a fairly new addition and it adds in 10 new races each season, along with 50 levels to grind to earn cosmetics, gear, and new cars. While there are some things that are free, the majority of rewards do require you to buy the pass. Since they are adding in content, I did buy it, although I typically hate battle passes. I just hate having to log in every day to do a checklist of things. While I'm okay with supporting the devs as long as they're adding in new content, I do wish the rewards were a little bit better. A lot of the rewards are just extra money or crew credits, which are definitely needed, but more cosmetics would be nice. You also do get 3 cars with each battle pass, but while that is nice, it does create a problem, but again, more on that later. Okay, so as always, I have some thoughts. Personally, I'm an intermediate level player trying to become better, and over time I have noticed some issues crop up, but nothing too major, and it would take a whole other video to go over all of them. From a purely gameplay standpoint, the game is really fun and for the most part plays well. The controls are responsive on a controller relative to other games, and there's a great variety of content. Like I've said, having all the different event types keeps the game consistently fresh. The seasons have added in a ton of new races, and some of them have been really fun. They've added in stunt courses, point gathering courses, and even police chases. On top of that, they've consistently added in new cars, so there's always something new to collect. The map for the most part is great, and it has a really incredible photo mode if that's your thing. Overall, basically just really fun gameplay and plenty of content. But I do have some nitpicks and minor grievances, and many of them stem from the amount of time I personally have to play the game. One is how long it's taken to get to this amount of content. Just imagine if the game launched with the proper amount at the start and had consistently added in new things over time. And as I've played more, I have noticed the need to fine-tune the settings for each car and have noticed some issues. Granted, some of these issues are in basically every racing game because you are using a controller to simulate a car wheel. But I feel like they could have tuned the experience a little better out of the box, as there's some settings that will make certain races, especially the street racing and hypercar racing, considerably better. Also, there's just a global setting for things like steering linearity and steering dead point. I wish we could tune this for each individual vehicle, or at the least for a racing category. I've found different settings work better depending on if you're driving a car or a boat, and it's kind of obnoxious to constantly go in the settings and have to change it. It's not a huge issue, but it does get annoying after a while. But this is something I've only really noticed being an issue now that I've been playing racing games a lot. When I first started up the Crew 2, I had not played a racing game in over a decade, so I was clueless as to what control scheme felt good or not, so your mileage may vary. However, when it comes to drifting, you do have to change some settings or else it's almost non-functional. Even with fixing the settings, drifting is the weakest race category gameplay-wise, but if you practice, you can make it work, and I've seen some people become ridiculously good at it. There is a method that allows people to get an insane amount of points in drift events. I've tried it out, and I'm just terrible at it. But I can say with some practice how people can get some really good scores with this method. However, it requires quite a bit of customization and an obnoxious tactic to pull it off, and I don't think people should have to do this to be competitive with the drifting. It really should just work out of the box much better. Also, I do wish there are ways to get the unique vehicle rewards from past events. I've read they sometimes do repeat previous summits, but for the most part, once it's gone, it's gone. That can be off-putting to newer players if they missed out on something they really wanted, and I know there's a few cars I personally would have liked to have had the chance to win, but they were in events that were up while I wasn't playing the game. Now, most of the unique cars are variations on existing cars in the game, but they still could easily have a second summit each week that has repeat rewards and maybe some looser requirements to win them so newer players can have a chance. The PvP live battles do leave a lot to be desired. It's not something I'm really interested in, but I can imagine for other people this might be a little disappointing. Basically, there's two types of PvP battles, street and hypercar races, and mixed events. Each week the list switches up, but that's really it, and on PC at certain times in the day, the wait time to get a match going can be fairly long. I mean, it's there for people who want to do PvP battles, but I think the live summit is far more fun. I just wish there were more than 9 races each week, as once you've gotten the best scores you can get, I always wish I had something else to do. Granted, once you reach the endgame, you will need to spend a lot of time grinding. I mean, live service games are kinda like that by default, but I think the grindiness needs to be fine-tuned a bit. They have fixed it since launch, and getting loot is significantly easier than it was when I went for the Platinum, which is a good thing. That is for getting max level gear anyways, which is only the beginning of the battle. It's luck-based of course, but getting a full legendary set can take forever, and then actually getting the fixes on that gear can be just as challenging. You can reroll the fixes, but it becomes progressively more and more expensive, to the point where you have to give up on a piece of gear because it just becomes too expensive to do so. It costs money and spare parts to reroll, and you get spare parts from dismantling unneeded gear. I always have way more spare parts than I need, but money is always an issue, especially since you need to buy new vehicles each week if you want to participate in the live summit. They do a weekly bundle where you can buy all the cars needed for a summit at a discount, but you'll still need to play a decent amount to afford it. Although that being said, this can be a good way to build up a vehicle collection. Now, these are really only issues because I have a limited time to play because I'm reviewing 40+ hour games each week. If I wasn't doing that, this might not be as much of an issue, but it still would take a lot of grinding, and I do think at the very least they should increase the amount of money you're rewarded from races. But that's the purpose of a live service game. They want it to be the only one you play. Which is fine as long as the game is good and enough new content is consistently added in. And while I do think they could add in content more frequently, and I do wish that there were a few more cities on the map, it is overall a very fun game to play. 2 things I think would drastically help the game out are 1, adding it to Game Pass, and 2, adding in a course creation tool for players. Now, I doubt Microsoft would ever add it to Game Pass because they don't want it competing with Forza Horizon, but the game would greatly benefit from that. It doesn't have as many users, but PlayStation Now might be a good choice, or even maybe making it a PlayStation Plus monthly game. I haven't seen anything about a player course creator, but that would extend interest in the game for years to come if people always had new custom courses to try out. I don't know if they would ever add something in like this, but we can all hope. I do really like that in the last patch they went and fixed all the races that had ways to glitch out the race and get better times. They even reset all the leaderboards, and while it should have been like this at launch, at least they care enough to finally fix some issues. So while I do think they could have added in a few more things, there's certainly enough here. There's also the issue of the live service microtransactions and the currency you can buy called crew credits. It's far from the worst I've seen, and there are no loot boxes. You can buy cars and vanity items, but that's it. There's no way to buy better parts, so it isn't pay to win. I will say the prices for everything using crew credits is absolutely insane. It just seems like a method to catch whales, which is certainly obnoxious, but this is one of the more benign implementations of microtransactions that I've seen in a live service game. There's more I would like to go over, but this would turn into a 3-hour video, so I'll definitely be doing a video on what I would like to see in a potential third game sometime in the future. As far as the Platinum Trophy requirements go, it's actually fairly straightforward. You finish the story, which in my opinion was a good time and allows you to build up gear. Even if it was mostly cheesy, there were a few good moments like in one 2-part hypercar race that I do not want to spoil. Of course, since it's a Ubisoft game, there's collectibles, or at least in the form of photos anyways. There's a checklist of a bunch of different things you need to photograph, but you only need to do 40 of them, which didn't take long at all. Outside of that, it's just really easy miscellaneous stuff like own 30 vehicles and do 1 event in each discipline. The one that can be a little tedious is the Coast to Coast trophy, which is a very long hypercar race. Since you probably won't have the best gear, make sure you have nothing to do for 40 or 50 minutes because it is a very long race. And lastly, the only one that did pose a challenge was to score 100,000 points in a drift event. Now that I have better gear for my cars and a lot more experience, 100,000 points really isn't that challenging at all, but when I was going for the Platinum, I struggled with this one badly. Like I said, you will need to find the right settings to tune your car to, and that will make your life so much easier, but this one will require some practice. It's one of those things where it's hard at first, but once it clicks, it clicks. And lastly, I wanted to mention performance. When I played on the PS4 Pro, it was stuck at 30 FPS, which was pretty disappointing. And they have yet to add in any PS5 patches, which is odd because even Ghost Recon Breakpoint got a 60 FPS patch for PS5. On PC, it runs great even with a lower end PC like mine, and I can max out everything and get a pretty consistent 60 FPS at 1080p. I can even raise it up to 1440p, and while there will be some dips, overall it's usually a very playable 60 FPS. What baffles me, however, is the 60 FPS cap in a game that was released in 2018, which is practically unheard of. Apparently it's an engine issue, and I have no explanation as to they could possibly have not realized this was an issue. I mean, 60 FPS is fine, but in a racing game you want as much FPS as you can get to make the driving feel smoother and more responsive. It's disappointing, but begrudgingly not a deal breaker for me. I did also experience some pop-in issues. Don't get me wrong, the draw distance is extremely impressive, especially when you're flying, but I have noticed when you're driving at high speeds in races that have traffic, the draw distance for that traffic is very short, so sometimes you will not have enough time to react to the cars appearing in front of you. Although this is only an issue for lane races that have traffic, so it's only a small issue. I would also highly recommend installing the Crew 2 on an SSD, as it will make the experience so much better. The load times aren't terrible, but just small things like opening the map can take a few seconds on a traditional hard drive. When I went from my PS4 Pro's external hard drive to my PC's SSD, it was almost like playing a different game. But I did platinum it on a standard hard drive, so the game is totally playable on one, but an SSD makes it that much better. Okay, so is the Crew 2 worth playing in 2021? As always, it depends, but I would say yes for the most part. If you're a racing fan, especially if you played the Forza Horizon games already, or if you're a Need for Speed fan and are looking for something else to play, I would say absolutely try it out because it can be a lot of fun. Even if you're not a racing fan and find some of the mechanics intriguing, I would say give it a shot when it's on a deep sale, which is pretty frequent nowadays, which is how I got into the game. And finally, for trophy hunters, I would also recommend it. It's not an overly difficult platinum, and it's a fairly rare one, which is always nice to have. It has a very good beginner to intermediate experience, and while I do think there's a lot to enjoy, for the lack of a better term hardcore level, it is lacking in some areas. And you will probably have to look up guides for a lot of the things to be competitive at the expert level. The game has some flaws, but I do think there's enough good content to have a good time with it. The current season will go to September, and I would imagine they will continue to support the game for years to come. As far as if they'll continue to add in new content, it's hard to say. If they do stop adding in new content, I at least hope they'll do something like put previous summits on rotation, so we can have other chances to win the unique cars we missed out on and for newer players. Keep in mind, it can be a bit of a grind, but a grind is only an issue if you're not having fun. I've consistently found something interesting to do, so the grind has never really been a huge issue. I just find myself not having enough time to play the game enough to do well in the summit events. But you don't have to do the summit events, there's still plenty of things to enjoy without it, and it's even better if you have a friend to play with, as this will reduce your grind time significantly. So with all that said, I'm going to award the Crew 2 a gold trophy. I had a ton of fun, so much fun that I rebought it on PC and have played it off and on since platinuming it over a year ago. In a perfect world, I would have continued playing on the PlayStation, but 30 FPS is pretty brutal in a racing game. I wish it was cross-save too, but that's extremely rare, unfortunately. Anyways, if you also got the platinum, let me know how much you enjoyed it in the comments down below. The big gaming fall release cycle is nearly here, so there's going to be a lot going on in just a few weeks. I will be reviewing Samurai Warriors 5 since I'm a huge fan of the series, and I will be also covering all the upcoming Godfall updates. I'm trying to get some review copies of upcoming games so I can do more timely reviews, but I have not heard anything yet, but I'm still hopeful. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share my content. Thanks so much for watching, see you all in the next video.